my show, Conversations with Friends, or actually I should start off and say my name. Welcome everyone. This is Megan Mermaid, and this is my show, Conversations with Friends, where I interview real people who are also my friends that are doing some extraordinary things. Today I have my beautiful friend, Daniella Gallegos here, and she is a personal growth coach and an affirmations and intentions writer working on her very first book. So how are you, Daniella? I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm so great today. Thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing with this show. I've watched a few of the episodes and this is awesome. I think people really need to see real people doing the work and using the work that they've done and putting it out there. So I love what you've done here. So thank you for having me.
So much. Yeah, it's been amazing to just to see all of the extraordinary things that we're all doing. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about what you've been up to. I know I've known you for several years and I've just seen all of the growth and you just really coming into your own in this beautiful divine feminine power. And so what are you up to now?
So I have a lot of things going on right now. As you mentioned, I am working on my first book. I am working on an affirmations and intentions book. And I started this back in 2019 when I was kind of catapulted into my healing journey. I got divorced, or my father had passed away the year before, and I had been going through the cycle of therapy, and I started realizing that I loved talking about everything that was going on in my grief and therapy, but I needed a better outlet, and I've always written. Writing is something that I have always done as just something that's very therapeutic to me. And it just kind of evolved into writing these affirmations and setting these intentions for myself. So I started posting them on my Instagram page, and I didn't realize how many people that they were reaching, and people messaging me all the time saying, "Thank you so much. That affirmation helped me today." And so that's when I started getting that idea that everything that I've written is meant to be shared. So yes, I'm currently working on that right now, and I'm hoping to have that self-published by April, May. My birthday is in May, so that will actually be my big birthday present to myself. So that's one of the main things. And then the other thing, very near and dear to my heart right now, is I'm currently in the process of putting together a 6-week workshop, personal growth workshop for women, in teaching them how to carry their healing journey, and how to work through their healing journey. And it's something that I've dreamed of putting together basically my whole life, creating a community of self-healers. So that's the other thing that I'm working on.
Wow, that's so amazing. I'm so excited for you and all of the magic that you're putting into the world. So let's talk about the affirmations first. Can you tell us a little bit about what an affirmation is? If somebody's like, what is an affirmation? And they're brand new to this stuff, what is it and why is it important?
So an affirmation to me is basically a statement saying I am, bringing goodness back into your life, bringing goodness back into your heart. And I found this to be probably one of the biggest things that I had to do each and every morning. I was stuck in such a low place that I had to be my own cheerleader. I had to pep talk myself. I had to give myself a pep talk every single morning and say, I am worthy. I am abundant. I am joyful. And sometimes it was just allowing myself to write out what I know that I am, but I'm not feeling in that moment. So these affirmations were a tool for me to use to just help increase my confidence, because at the time, those were the only good things I could say to myself, because I had so much negative self-talk going on in my head that an affirmation is what basically got me through the day. It was just reaffirming who I truly am to my core and trying to ignore all of the outside noise. Because if I just had that one statement during the day, I would be okay. So
That's
that's
so
good enough.
beautiful. Yeah, and I feel like so many people can relate to that, especially when we're just starting to figure out like, oh my gosh, I have this really loud inner critic in my head. How do I get out of this? It's a challenge that we go through as humans. And I love that you broke it down into just one statement. I feel like sometimes we can really overcomplicate things and kind of get in our own way. But I love that it's just one thing, like that raft that you can go on throughout the day. And it just like keeps you afloat.
Yeah, definitely. And so when I started writing my affirmations, like I said, I was just in a really low place in my life. And what I started realizing is as I would write these affirmations, like when I first started, they would just be the one statement, I am worthy. And that actually was the first one that I did. And I remembered that pivotal moment sitting on my couch with my journal, just feeling hopeless and super distraught about where my life was going because I had no idea. You know, my ex-husband and I had literally just decided that we were done. And I didn't know, growing up the way I did, imagining that I could have this big, beautiful life on my own was never taught to me. So I remember sitting on my couch and just writing out that statement, I am worthy. And from there, it just evolved to actually putting out things I am worthy of. And it became, I'm worthy of love. I am worthy of money. I am worthy of joy. It was a process of just coming up with one statement that, like you said, that would keep me on that raft to keep me afloat. Because I think when we overcomplicate things, we tend to put everything that we need aside because the picture is so daunting when it's too big. So just having the one statement allowed me to envision a life that was so much bigger than where I was at that moment.
Wow, that's amazing. And so, can you share a little bit about some of the good things that have happened since starting this affirmation journey?
So there have been many good things that have happened since starting this affirmation journey. But the biggest thing has been my confidence, my self confidence, truly allowing myself the opportunity to dream, allowing myself the opportunity to see myself in a bigger light and not see myself as just a mom, just a wife. I saw myself for the person that I've always wanted to be, and that's just me, Daniella. I saw myself as Daniella. And that's what the journey really was about, was coming back to myself. I had spent so many years doing for everybody else that I needed to find my way back home to my heart, back home to my soul. Being on that journey has allowed me to think big. I am becoming an entrepreneur. My relationship with my children, my parenting style has completely changed. I took the leap of faith and I'm writing my affirmations and intentions book. I have found a healthy love in relationship. But most importantly, I have found such a healthy love for myself. And I have truly taken the bull by its horns and just taken control of my life. And that's what was missing in my life for so long, was living life for me and having the freedom having the freedom to control where I wanted to go, but just also allowing myself to go through any door that opens if it feels right, trusting my intuition.
Oh, so many pearls of wisdom. And I feel like so many women can relate. I love when you shared, I'm not just a mom, I'm not just a wife, like I'm me and I have this journey and I have this purpose. And is that sort of what you're focusing on with this personal growth coaching?
Yes, I want women to learn what their purpose is. I am a speech therapist by career and trade. I've been a speech therapist for 14 years now. And during those 14 years, I have taught children and young adults how to find their voice, how to find their physical voice. And what I realized throughout my journey is that voice is all encompassing. While I've been doing the work and teaching people how to find their physical voice, what I had lost in that process was my soul's voice. I had lost that inner voice. I had stopped listening to it. And so my goal with my personal growth coaching is to teach women to find people, to teach people, but mainly women, to find that inner voice and to use it to help define their purpose and to live a life of purpose. When you truly get to that point of living out your purpose, the game changes. Everything around you starts changing because you see life through a different lens because you're not just doing, you're doing, but you're also living, and you're living in something that's actually bigger than yourself.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And what a beautiful story that you've been working for so many years to help people find their voice and you found your soul's voice. And I love what you shared about how everything changes when you start living with purpose. And I find that with so many of my clients, that's the thing that so many people are searching for. What is my purpose? What am I here to do? What's the meaning behind all of this? So, where could someone start if they have these types of questions?
So if they have these types of questions, the first thing I always guide my clients to do is to write a list. Write a list of the things in your life that make you feel good. And then, so I always have them start with the good things. But then I ask clients to make another list, and I want them to put where they feel stuck. And more often than not, it's usually centered around career. It's centered around how much they do for others and not having this time for themselves, not doing what they personally want to do. So I have always said, find that piece of yourself that you feel is missing. And how do we go about filling that part? For some, it could be just finding 15 to 20 minutes to walk, to just have that time with themselves. And it really is about cultivating that relationship with yourself. And I think that part gets lost a lot because we get so wrapped up in just doing. We do for work, we do for our families, but what are we really doing for ourselves? So that's where I love to teach people is where can we identify those obstacles and get through them so you can come back to yourself.
I love that, Daniela. And I love your practical Taurus wisdom. It's like, bring it on from out here, put it on paper, and then look
Yes.
at it. Because really, that's such a powerful tool is when you have it on paper, it's out of your body, it's out of your head, and you can see it for what it is, especially those parts where you feel stuck. And what I found is that often the stuckness, like you were talking about, is a big part of your purpose because where you feel stuck, what you've been searching for ends up what you share your medicine for other people. And I can so relate with like, leaving a marriage and trying to figure out who I am and starting all over again. If it wasn't for like the teachers and the healers and the mentors and the people that I knew at those times, like I would have felt so lost. So this work that you're doing is so important. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit more about what it looks like to live with purpose. The reason I say this is because I feel like sometimes people get confused and think like, oh, my purpose is I have to be doing this and I have to check this off and then this off and then this off. But sometimes it's more of just like a feeling or an embodiment. So what does it look like to you to be living with purpose?
It's 100% what you just said. It's a feeling, it's an embodiment. For me, living my purpose is living in truth. I had to peel away every single mask that I lived under. I did what I was supposed to do my whole life. I went to college. I met the successful man. I got married. I had babies, but I was empty. There was so much emptiness in my life. And I realized that everything that I was doing up until basically up until my father passed away in 2017, I just realized that my life was void of, well, purpose, because I knew if I was living the life that I was supposed to be living, I wouldn't be feeling that way. And it was almost like at that moment, I put on my little hobo pack, and I was like, okay, what journey are we going to go on now? And as I started shedding all these layers of who I thought I was, what the ideal goal in life were, when I started shedding all of that off, I felt lighter. I felt like I was able to speak my truth. I learned how to be unapologetic about the things that I wanted. It wasn't easy to get there. And that's where the work comes in, because you have to take a very authentic look in the mirror and ask yourself, what do I truly want? What do I want to feel like? And you don't realize it until you start taking breaths and you're like, I can breathe. And that's when I knew I was doing something right and I was starting to give back in a more purposeful way, because I was actually just being myself. I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, so I've dabbled in many businesses. And I go back to posts that I had done, or just the businesses that I have run, and I realized like I could see glimpses of that girl trying to get out. Like that was my outlet in trying to teach people how to love themselves and how to care for themselves. But I wasn't there yet. So for me, my purpose is authenticity. My purpose is being able to allow myself the grace to just be who I am unapologetically, but also learning how to integrate that and give that forward to other people, to teach people you can live in your truth. You don't have to follow what you're seeing everywhere else, that is the true life path, that is the true life purpose. And you're absolutely right, when people get confused on that. They get confused in thinking, well, I should be here, I should be doing that. But that's also because that's what we see. We see it everywhere. And so my job, I feel, is to bring people back in to show that you can still live a life of purpose and be who you are. You don't have to dim your light just because you think you need to be seen in a different way.
Absolutely. And I love that you shared that you feel like your purpose is authenticity, because it's so true that when you're real and when you're just being yourself, everything that's in alignment with you is a match. And when you're not, when you're wearing those masks, it's like we're living in this like isolated space of loneliness. We could have all of these people all around us, but because we don't know who we are,
Right.
we can't fully connect. And so I know that you had talked about that it's changed your parenting style. And I also know that come a long way with co-parenting. Would you like to share a little bit more about that? How finding yourself and finding your purpose has improved your family relationships?
Absolutely. So I think what it came down to was I started seeing certain not behaviors, but I started seeing certain things about my children and realizing that the typical the typical parent wasn't going to work for my children. The fake mommy wasn't going to work. And I don't say that in a way where I'm trying to be negative. I just know that my style of parenting is doesn't go along with the norm. And for example, both of my children have very dynamic personalities. And I struggled with that the first couple of years because my ex-husband and I, we used to not agree on how to parent our children. I'm very intuitive. I would sometimes sense that the energy was very different with them. And, I had to move on from that children need to be seen and not heard mentality, because that's how I was raised. I mean, I'm a child of the late 70s, early 80s. So that's how we were raised. You were afraid to even speak your truth and or even just disappoint people. And I lived under that good girl complex forever, that I didn't want that for my children. And my ex-husband and I had to really learn how to blend our parenting styles. We couldn't do it when we were married, but we have been very successful co-parenting because he now sees me as an individual and I now see him as an individual. So we have allowed ourselves to really come together and blend what his strengths are and what my strengths are into helping our children. And for example, my son was recently diagnosed with ADHD. And that was a very difficult time for us because, as co parents, because I think we both saw it from a very different perspective. And for me, I actually saw my son's ADHD diagnosis as something so positive because my mom of instinct was telling me that my son wasn't getting the support that he needed. And he kept getting dismissed as, oh, he's just a rambunctious boy. That's all it is. His grades are fine. He's okay. But I knew in my heart that there were some emotional regulation issues that he had. And, I spoke to my ex-husband about it. And at first, I almost felt like we were at odds with each other. But after getting my son the support that he needed, we were really able to kind of just put our own opinions and our own biases aside to really come together for our son. And I think for me, the main thing has been learning to trust my instinct, but also allowing myself the grace to just know that my ex-husband is a human being. He's not perfect. I'm not perfect. But at the end of the day, our main goal is our children and teaching them to become good humans. And that's where my parenting style has changed is I've relinquished so much control. I used to want to have our days so scheduled. I had my kids on schedule since the minute they were born. And then when my ex-husband moved out, I remember sitting on the floor and being like, we have no schedule anymore. Like I just, it didn't work. And I just had to be super honest with myself and ask myself as a parent, what do I want for my children? And how can I use what I've learned and how I've had to heal to help them? So in parenting them, I'm constantly reparenting myself as well. That's been huge in my parenting style. And in working with my ex-husband too, is knowing that I don't have all the answers all the time. So I really have to go on instinct a lot. And I think we forget that as parents is, we can read all the books in the world. We can fall into these movements as, different types of parenting, but it truly is instinct. We know our children best. And nobody can tell us how to raise our children because we already know they're in our lives for a reason. They're our children. And there are lessons to be learned with our children. So I think allowing myself the grace to see them as who they are and not want them to be who I think they need them to be, because I'm still learning with them too.
Yeah. Wow. So much wisdom. I feel like we could do a whole talk just on parenting.
Right?
So
I
much.
know.
And, it's really powerful how you've been able to learn so many lessons through the lens of mother, the grace of seeing you and your co-parent as a team, but also recognizing that, everyone's learning as we go. And I love that. It's just so freeing and liberating when you just realize that, like, people have been doing this since the beginning of time and they figured it out. And so,
Exactly.
yeah. And
Exactly.
it's amazing too how you really followed your instinct and you trusted that and you found the right resources and that you're able to see that everything is a blessing, especially, that can feel really challenging when parents get news like that. And I
Mhm.
feel like, sometimes we have to honor all of it. We have to honor the grief of what we thought life was going to be like, or the direction we thought we were going to go. And then see this new path as the medicine, as the lesson and the blessing. So it sounds like you have so much wisdom in this area. I can probably learn a lot from you still. I'm just beginning this journey.
And I think for me, and there are no accidents on the paths that we're placed on. You know, like I said, I've been a speech therapist for 14 years now, and I have I have witnessed growth from families whose children were diagnosed with, speech disorders and autism. So it was one of those things that when I started noticing that my son, that there was just something that was off. I just knew. I remember thinking to myself that I didn't want him to be labeled. But at the same time, I needed him to know, because he's 8 now. I wanted him to be able to empower himself. Like, just because he has ADHD doesn't mean that he is going to be so limited. Like, in fact, knowledge is power. And what if he knows how to go around these obstacles? Hey, you've got life in the bag, buddy. Like, it's just one of those things to me where I have been blessed to be in a field where I have witnessed families going through their own process of it. So it really did prepare me for when we sought the help for my son. It's a work in progress. There's a lot of pivoting. I actually learned that recently from a mommy friend. She's a very, I admire this woman so much. She's a very career oriented woman, has 3 children of her own. And she said that one day to me, and I thought, wow, that's exactly what parenting is. You're constantly pivoting. And it was, because we always look at things from a lens of forward movement, let's grow. But when it comes to parenting and just relationships in general, we're pivoting, Sometimes the pivot goes back a little bit, but sometimes you pivot forward. And each pivot, I think, takes us on a pretty colorful journey. Yeah, but pivoting, when I heard pivoting, I was like, that definitely resonates.
It resonates with me too. And I feel like there's a lot of freedom in that, because you don't have to feel like it's always got to be this way, even if it's not working. And then that goes into like force and struggle and manipulation. But if you pivot, that's when you're in the flow and you're like, this is working, or this isn't working. Let me shift this. Let me change this a little bit. And I love that you shared about how knowledge is power. And it's so true that nothing has to limit us. I see this in spirituality a lot too, where it's like, for example, looking at the shadow, when we're not aware of our shadows, they're like wreaking havoc in our life, and they're unintegrated, and we're just oblivious to the fact of what's causing it. But when we start to look deep into it and we recognize the why of how we're programmed or how we are triggered, and we start to reintegrate that with compassion and understanding and wisdom, then those shadows become our powers. They become the seeds of our gifts and our acidic frequencies. And I feel like this is the same with what you're learning from your son, and with all these other different experiences of the families that you get to be around. It's just recognizing that this is what I'm working with, and this is how I can best support myself, knowing this information, and that nothing has to be good or bad, or, like a final say that it's always got to be this way. But yeah, it's just such a beautiful journey.
That definitely, I think for me, the integration of the shadow. We've been conditioned that these negative aspects will hinder us. Whereas I learned that life is so much richer when you acknowledge the quote unquote, the bad stuff. And, even the word shadow, like, I love that. I've always loved that word for some reason, how certain words resonate with you, because I just feel like when there's shadows, it's just the absence of light. However, light is still there. And for me, it's becoming one with my shadow. And I always see my shadow as those parts of me that I wanted to hide, those parts of me that were hidden. And all of those beautiful qualities that we have within us, they work together. And we can't ignore those. And you're allowed to have grace and forgiveness for those parts that you're not always proud of. Like you were talking about my Taurus practicality. Like, that's literally sometimes how my day is. I'm like, I was kind of a crap person today. So let me acknowledge that and let me move forward from it. I try to teach things in such practical and tangible ways that it doesn't have to be this big ordeal where I'm sitting with my shadow and it's taking over my life, where, trust me, I've had those moments, but acknowledging that those pieces, those components of ourselves truly make you who you are, and to lose the shame for it. That's another big thing that I teach in my personal growth sessions is releasing shame. Releasing shame for different parts of ourselves that we have hidden, going back to the shadow. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's actually a very big component in what I teach is how to take that shadow and use it to build yourself up and help you out with your purpose, because it's all interconnected. And we do, like in the spiritual world, sometimes my groundedness gets a little wrapped up in it, because sometimes I don't know how to dive so deep into it. And the only way I can do it is by having this grounded process for it, and in putting it into real life terms in my real world, which I know is difficult for some people, because we want to think of something that's so much bigger than ourselves. But I tend to bring myself down to the ground, because that's where I feel safe. The shadow aspect, I think sometimes we get lost in that and thinking that that's something that's so negative, and it's really not. It's a beautiful understanding of who you are.
I know. I feel like my life has changed so much in like learning about the shadow, teaching about the shadow. And I love how you share that you do it from this really grounded place. I feel like more voices in the grounded, practical, earth human way of doing things is needed, because,
Agreed.
sometimes we get like really abstract in these ideas, and they're beautiful ideas and they're beautiful schools of thought, but like, how does this make my life better? And that's really the question that we need to ask about every teaching or everything that we're searching for is, how is it enriching my life? How is it making my life better? And if it's not, oh, it's a beautiful idea, but what's the point?
Exactly. And that's why I was so passionate about putting this course that I'm putting together, because I think more realistic teachings of how to incorporate spirituality growth needs to be taught. I'm I don't want to say stubborn, because that has such a negative connotation, but I see things the way I see them sometimes. And I constantly have to check myself. And I know I'm not the only one that's like that. So, I want to reach the practical thinkers of the world and teach people how to just bring it into your everyday life. One thing that is huge for me is I meditate a lot, but I don't meditate the way it's taught. I love teaching people that meditation is personal. Meditation is wherever you find this moment where you can connect yourself, there's meditative thoughts in that. So that's actually one of those things, like you said, like I'm very passionate in teaching people that spirituality doesn't have to be completely out there, out in the outer realms. It's right here. It's within you. And there are so many things throughout your day that you can do to just come back home, come back to yourself, even if it's just for a minute. I'm constantly sitting there, just bringing it back. Takes a second, and okay, I'm ready. Let's party. So I love teaching that to people. I love teaching people to have that focus on mindfulness, because that's really what it comes down to. Is it's just one mindful thought, and then go about with your day. You don't have to be completely immersed in, I have to do all the work. That is the work. 1 second, you bring it back. Fine. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm very passionate about teaching people how to bring it home into everyday terms.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. When you said that is the work, like that's the work. It so is. And I love that you brought up meditation. And recently I've been studying the gene keys. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the gene keys at all. So it's a system that combines astrology and the I Ching. And what it does is it creates your hologenetic profile. There are 64 archetypes that are running everything. Like everybody is, every single person that has lived or will ever live has a unique makeup of these 64 archetypes. And so there are 12 inherent within us. And in each of those 12, there is a shadow frequency, then there's a gift frequency, and then there's the Siddhic frequency, which is like the God consciousness. But it shows how in the shadow is the gift. It is that all of it's together. And one of the most powerful practices that I've started working with since studying the gene keys is contemplation. So that has been a game changer for me because, sometimes a lot of people have trouble meditating. They have trouble quieting their thoughts, and they have trouble like just sitting still,
I mean,
But,
I'm a fidgeter, if you can't tell. I'm constantly, like, and I think that's one of my main things is like, coming back to yourself and meditating is hard. Like I was the first person, I remember taking my very first spiritual course that I took. A girlfriend of mine put it on. She's one of my mentors. And it was a lot of meditating. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I told her that. I was like, I can't do it. I literally cannot sit. So I'm sorry, continue. You're talking about that. Like it's hard.
It's so hard. And, for those of us that have really active minds, it's not the only way. And so one of these spiritual practices that he's bringing back, Richard Rudd, the author of the Gene Keys, is contemplation. And so it's like we can sit, and what I've been doing is like there's a mudra for epiphany where like you put your two thumbs together in like this 8, and then you kind of put your hands together, and then you can sit, and rather than trying to quiet your mind of no thoughts, you contemplate and you think about like, what does grace mean, or what does it mean to surrender? Like for example, when we were talking about the shadow, one of my gifts is totality. And so totality is recognizing all of it, the light, the dark, the happy, the sadness, all the feelings, just embracing all of life. And the Siddhic frequency of that is immortality. So that just goes to show how important it is to integrate the shadow. It's like we can't like cut ourselves off from part of us and part of the world and live a full life, live a life of wholeness.
No, you're absolutely right. It's the yin and the yang. We have to combine them together in order to have this, you said it perfectly, this feeling of wholeness, this complete being, this complete way of being. It can't just be one way without the other. I lived my life in just the one way. I was so empty, and this is the other thing that I teach, because I do a lot of personal growth stuff. And I love it when I work with clients and they're like, I kind of applied this in my personal relationship. It's the same thing. It's that same balance, that frequency of combining your light and combining your shadows and making them work to make you whole. And I love what you brought up. I'm really interested in learning more about what you're talking about, because I pick a word every single year. And that actually was my practice for a long time, was, when I would start spiraling, or I would start, just trying to find this space and just to quiet my mind and to make myself still, I would go to my word. And that I would think and contemplate on my word. One that stands out the most for me, I've had many words over the years, but I picked surrender as my word for 2 years in a row, because I truly was surrendering to a new way of life. My old way of life, the old me had to just go. And I feel, and I reference this a lot in my writings too, is the old me died when my father passed away. My father, when he passed, it's like my phoenix rose from the ashes after he passed. And the word surrender was my word, and that's what I would do sometimes when things would just get so out of control for me, or I was hit with so many emotions. Because that's the other thing. I am a Cancer moon, so I may be a Taurus, I may be Taurus earth energy, but I have a lot of emotions that run through me, and I don't always understand them. So that's what I would do, is I would take my word surrender, and I would literally just surrender to the feeling that I had in that moment, and think about that and say, okay, what are we surrendering to? What is it that we have to let go of? And I would just let my mind go from there and just breathe. And sometimes it took an intention of, I set the intention to just surrender my thoughts, surrender my feelings in this moment. So I love that. I really want to learn more about what you were talking about, because that I would love to incorporate that, learn more about it and incorporate it, because it's so true. You can find these contemplative moments in any parts of your life.
Yeah, I'll definitely share. And I know you'll love it because you're all into astrology and all those things. But yeah, what you share, I mean, I feel like the medicine that you have, Daniella, is the simplicity and the practicality. Like you have this ability to take these very complex uh, messages or ideas and ground them into reality and give someone a simple, practical step. Contemplate on this word, contemplate on this affirmation, do your breath, write your list. Like those are the things that we need as humans to be like, oh my God, like this is awesome, but what do I do? Like, how do I make this a part of my life and not make it just another thing to cross off? Like, I feel like what you offer is just something so accessible to so many people. And especially people that are just beginning on the spiritual path, they're just beginning to have an idea of who they are as an individual. So I'd love for you to just share, if someone is interested in working with you or finding out more about you, how can they find you?
So I am on Instagram, and I'm actually on all of them. I'm on. Um, it's funny because I sit here talking about social media, and sometimes I'm like, I'm about to be 44 years old, and I'm, because I have a preteen daughter, and I'm like, she's like, Mom, you need to start talking about social media in different terms. It's not the Facebook and it's not the Instagram. She's like, it's Insta. She's like, and nobody uses Facebook. But I am on Facebook. You can find me, Daniella Gallegos, and on Instagram, I'm Daniella.Gallegos. And I also have my website, daniellacgallegos.com. And on my website, you can learn about my story. You can learn about what I'm offering. My 6-week workshop link will be on there, and that will be starting in March. My website is usually the best place to reach me on, because everything is on there. My blog is on there. Just practical things that people can do to come back to themselves. I have some tips on there as well. Yeah, my website is always the best place to go. So that's daniellacgallegos.com.
Awesome, Daniella. So I will link all of those social media and website URLs in the bio below. And it was just so amazing to have you on here. Thanks for coming on. And I'd love to have you on again to have even more really fun conversations.
Yeah, I would love that.
Wonderful. And so again, if you want to learn more about my work, you can check out my website at meganmermaid.com. I'm on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at official Megan Mermaid. And you can also check out my new masterclass series, Galactic Leadership Training, with the link in bio. I love you all. I believe in you. And I hope that you have a beautiful day. Thank you, everyone.